So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at the state of the system to kind of give you an idea of what's getting ready to happen. This is onboarding a new user. That new user's name is John Doe. And so we have these input files that correspond with the inbound resources. And this file right here is the employee HCM resource. You can see in this inbound record, it's all the things that you would expect in identity management to have to process, all of the fields that are, describe us, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, so on and so forth. The thing where it starts to get interesting is down here in the assignments part, and you can see right here John Doe is going to be a manager for the DCI department. This is where the construction is going to happen. Right now that department does not exist, so if I go to the LDAP directory and look at employees and departments, you can see there is no DCI department down here. There's a DCAI, and of course John Doe's not there. John Doe is not, neither does he have an account in the directory yet. We can also see that there's no John Doe account inside of Google. There's also another record in here for John Doe. We're still in the employee file, which is another affiliation. And that is for another assignment, which is DCAI. So there's going to be two affiliations for this user for an employee. And then if we go to the student file, there's another record in here in the student's file for John Doe, because he's going to enroll as a student. He's going to be a member of a study for electronics. So when we onboard this user, they're going to have three affiliations. So I already showed you that, that the user does not exist inside of the directory. The user does not exist inside of Google accounts. So now I'm going to show you that the user does not exist inside of midPoint. So midPoint, again, has its version of the world with users, and when I list those users out, there is no John Doe. So how do we get him in here? So we are going to do an import. So, now we're getting into the topic of synchronization, which is an advanced topic. There's many ways to synchronize between midPoint and external resources. You can have live syncs. You can have a batch job that wakes up every so often and checks, or you can have like a daily job or whatever. What I'm doing here is just going to do an import, which is going to simulate, say, a live sync. This is not a real-world scenario. I'm just doing that for this demo. So what I have to do is import the user from both resources. Speaking of resources, here is the list of resources that are in play for this implementation. I already mentioned that we have an LDAP server, so we have an LDAP resource. We have Google Apps, so we have a Google Apps resource. And we have two of these HCM connectors. This one here, this HCM connector resource is for employees. This CS connector resource is for students. So I have to go inside of both of these HCM resource dialogues and trigger an import. So you can see these are the accounts that correspond with the student HCM resource, and we don't have a John Doe there, which is right, because we haven't actually created this user. So I'm going to click on the Resource tab, which shows the users as they exist in the resource, and we can see John Doe's there. From there, I'm going to select John Doe and do an import, which will then update John Doe's information. So I've done that on the student resource, and I need to do that on the employee resource as well, the same thing. So after I've done this import, what happens? So I already mentioned that we have this registration process that the user has to claim this account. So the accounts don't exactly exist yet inside the resources, but the user record inside of midPoint has been created. You can see now we have John Doe here. And if we go into that, we can see that they're in this state of draft. And we can see we've got projections and assignments. Projections are linkages to resources. So again, we can see the CS and the HCM resources there, which correspond with what we just did on that import. But there's no projection for OpenLDAP or Google Apps, meaning that account has not been created in either one of those resources yet. If we look at assignments, we can see the affiliations that have been granted to this user as part of the import. We've got the DCAI, which is an employee affiliation. We got the DCI manager, which is an employee affiliation. We got this electronics, which is a student affiliation. These roles right here are midpoint specific roles that correspond with what the user can do with the midpoint system itself. They've got some power here, but they are missing one very important role, which is the end user role, meaning this user cannot log on yet. So how do we get this user to self-register? That's going to be in the form of a notification and an email. But we don't have SMTP server set up with this demo environment, so we're going to simulate that activity through looking at a file that midpoint writes to. And we can see here that 2 notifications have been generated as part of that step, this first scenario. We've got an email that was sent to John Doe himself to say, hey, click this link to register. And we got an email that was sent to the administrator of the system to say, hey, we got a new user who's registering. So I get to copy this link and open it up. Okay, so as you would expect, we've got this user, see they've got email with this account, and they are prompted to enter a password. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. This is a strong password. There are password policies in effect on this account, downstream, and even the user account. So the Google Apps has password policies. OpenLDAP would have password policies. Okay, so I have successfully registered. Now I have to confirm it. So back to my notification, I've got another link for confirmation. I'm going to follow that link now. Okay, so confirmation successful. So we've just completed the second scenario. The user is self-registered. So as a result of this, now if we look at the user account for John Doe, we can see we have 2 additional projections. We've got one into Google Apps and one to LDAP, which corresponds with accounts that were constructed as part of this process. And then we've got an additional assignment end user, meaning that this user can now log on to the midpoint console for, say, doing self-registration or managing of their employees. Another thing that happened as a result of this is within the organizational structures. So inside of the employee, we've created a new department, DCI, for which John Doe's a member. So if we go to Google, we can see that an account has indeed been created for John Doe. And if we go to the LDAP directory and we look at the records there, we can see that, yes, we've created an account for John Doe and their status is enabled. And we can look at the departments under the employee and see that a new group was constructed, DCI, of which John Doe is a member. And the DCAI group, John Doe is now a member. And the electronics group, John Doe is now a member. So this user can now enroll, they can now do their job as an employee, and it was pretty much automated via the process that you just saw.